In 1775, Thomas Paine wrote a pamphlet stating that the freedoms of man can only be maintained by limiting the power of government. The pamphlet was called Common Sense, and today it still is Common Sense. This week on Common Sense, our guest, Distinguished Professor of Business Administration Edward Mazze, tells us we ought to slow down on the Pawsox move deal. We join Elizabeth Smith and guest anchor Mark Zaccaria for the news. Jeffrey Shard is scratching his head over housing authorities. And of course, we are asking, are you kidding me? But first, let's start with the news.
I'm Mark Zaccaria.
And I'm Elizabeth Smith, and this is Common Sense. We welcome former Republican Party Chair Mark Zaccaria to our news desk.
Thanks for having me. And now on to the news. On Tuesday, Rhode Island Governor Gina Raimondo and the state's General Treasurer Seth Magaziner urged the passage of legislation they claimed would put the state government in control of financing for a narrow range of local infrastructure improvement projects. The new proposed organization, according to these state executives, would concentrate on funding construction projects intended to increase energy efficiency. Providence Journal's Kathy Gregg reports that initial funding of some $22 million is sought from a patchwork of existing bond authority and leftover federal stimulus funds. As reported in Projo, the new agency would offer loan guarantees to private banks for their backing of energy efficiency initiatives. In that way, this so-called bank would be similar to the old EDIC loan fund of $125 million, which was virtually depleted in a single transaction in 2010. The backing of 38 studios. In essence, Rhode Island's executive leadership is promoting a return to the policy of using taxpayer dollars to hold private enterprises harmless if a covered project fails, at least according to Robert Boiselle, the lobbyist for and executive director of the trade association, Associated Builders and Contractors of Rhode Island. Legislators are being urged by concerned citizens to look at the model of the Bank of North Dakota as a better example of how to organize a real state bank. BND is a profit-making organization which is wholly owned by the government of North Dakota. It offers check cashing services, deposit insurance, and monetary policy assistance to state-chartered banks within the Peace Garden state. Since the profits from these operations accrue to the state treasury rather than to the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank, BND can offer more favorable rates on state deposits and is widely credited with promoting economic activity within its state borders. Ocean State legislators should take great care in considering the establishment of a real Bank of Rhode Island. The risks associated with mismanagement are as real as the rewards of doing it right. The current proposal, however, in the words of ABC's Mr. Boiselle, simply protects labor agreements. His inference is that closing non-union shops out of the bidding process will drive up costs. As usual, our state legislature finds itself at a crossroad.
The Providence Journal reported this week that an ethics complaint has been filed against Susan Cicilline-Buono, alleging she used Cranston School email and phone system in her campaign for the House District 33 seat that Narragansett Democrat Donald Lally resigned. Glenna Hapogian, a former Narragansett Town Council president, filed a complaint April 24th with the Rhode Island Ethics Commission. She included 2 copies of 2 emails sent from Buono's Cranston School email account to the Democratic Town Committee and said Buono was clearly leveraging Cranston's municipal assets for the use and campaign for the District 33 seat. The complaint also states that Buono was using her Cranston School phone number as a contact number on campaign finance reports. Cicilline-Buono said, "I made an honest mistake by using my work email account. I have created a new email account for my campaign. Yes, Susan, we know another Democrat that has an issue with email. The name Hillary comes to mind." Cicilline-Buono is up against several other Democrats in a primary on May 5th, and then several independent candidates and Bob Traeger, the Republican, on June 9th.
Turning to the original Pawsox Stadium proposal, the original Pawsox Stadium proposal for Providence appears dead. But will Jim Skeffington and company now sweeten the deal? On Monday, Rhode Island Governor Gina Raimondo appeared to signal the death knell for the proposed new baseball stadium in Providence. The bid to move the Pawsox 3 miles south was widely seen as yet another attempt to force Ocean State taxpayers to foot the bill for the team's fixed expenses. Doing so would certainly guarantee its new owners of that much more profit. There is wide skepticism, though, that the people of the state would receive any value for their money. To understand Governor Raimondo's political motivation for squashing the original deal, observers look no further than to the remarkable coalition of political forces which was quickly organized against it. In April, as new Pawsox owner Jim Skeffington arrived at Rhode Island Commerce Commission headquarters for talks on the deal, he was met with a disparate crowd of vocal opponents. representatives of Rhode Island Tea Party, the Republican Party, Progressive Democrats of Rhode Island, the Green Party, Direct Action for Rights and Equality, Occupy Providence, the Rhode Island Sierra Club, Rhode Island Taxpayers Association, the Rhode Island Libertarian Party, and the Capital Good Fund stood side by side to take a stand together against what they all termed as corporate welfare. In a move that surprised no one, Channel 12 Television reported later that day that Mr. Skeffington was seeking further talks with city and state insiders to discuss a revised deal. Will Pawsox ownership sweeten the deal all the way to the point where they assume the risks for their proposed move as well as for its reward? Watch this space.
Now let's catch up with the Republican caucus at the State House to see what they're up to.
Senator Nick Kittle, we heard about 4 bills, S-816, 818, 19, and 20, that are related to Roadmap Rhode Island, but there was supposed to be a hearing and it was postponed. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, those pieces of legislation that was submitted by Senator Cody, myself, I'm co-sponsoring them to make Roadmap Rhode Island for municipalities that would make it enabling, allow them to opt out of certain requirements. Possibly those get postponed at the request of the sponsor. If they want to get somebody here to testify who couldn't make it, or some other unforeseen circumstances. So it's not all bad. There are legitimate reasons why legislation can get postponed.
Ed Block recently testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee on the line item veto. Hear what he had to say.
44 other states in our great country have some form of line item veto. Of the 6 that don't, only one other state gives its governor as little power as ours does to have any role in the budgetary process once the original budget is drafted. In every other circumstance, 48 other governors have mechanisms available to them to have a role in the final look and feel and actuality of the budget. And Rhode Island does not. And I believe it kills us.
Line item veto allows the governor the ability to veto a portion of the budget without vetoing the entire budget.
According to Go Local Prov, a record high 57% of Rhode Island voters supports changing the state's law to regulate and tax marijuana like alcohol, according to a survey conducted this month by Public Policy Polling. Only 35% were opposed to the change for the full results. Not too surprising, since Rhode Islanders are among the nation's top marijuana users in the country. A press conference was held recently in the State House to discuss the poll's findings, including local results from townwide polls. Director Jared Moffett of Regulate Rhode Island stated, "The Marijuana Regulation, Control, and Taxation Act creates a responsible alternative that proactively controls for public health concerns while allowing adults 21 and older the freedom to legally use marijuana if they choose. Taking the marijuana market above board will create tax-paying jobs and allow the state to tax the distribution and sale of marijuana," unquote. Regulate Rhode Island is a coalition of citizens and organizations committed to ending what they call the failed policy of marijuana prohibition and replacing it with a system in which marijuana is regulated and taxed similarly to alcohol. It's a real joint venture. In mid-January of this year, Governor John Hickenlooper of Colorado said the public's decision to legalize marijuana was a bad idea. According to the Washington Examiner, Hickenlooper suggested other governors wait a couple of years before legalizing marijuana so they can see what Colorado does, specifically with federal laws and regulation. State lawmakers in Rhode Island should heed his advice.
This week, new Commerce Secretary Stefan Pryor testified before the General Government Subcommittee of the House Finance Committee. In his presentation, Secretary Pryor outlined the fiscal year 16 budget request for his newly created agency. He attempted to defend the nearly four-fold jump from an initial estimate of $22.9 million to more than $83 million of actual proposed spending. Some $4.3 million worth of that increase is slated for salaries to fund the first year for 24 new state employees. Also, $25 million worth of the increase is said to be set aside to encourage the commitment of an anchor tenant for the now languishing I-195 real estate, which was created by the Highway Project. Committee member Representative Patricia Morgan of West Warwick commented that this was budget enough for considerable encouragement. Her colleague, Representative Daniel P. Riley of Portsmouth, insisted that Secretary Pryor offer projected measurements of success for such expenditure. I quote, "If we're giving $25 million to spur development, I want to see metrics. How much is the real estate worth now versus how much it's worth after it's developed," unquote. In a Providence Journal editorial dated in April, the opinion was offered that House Speaker Nicholas Mattiello gets it, that Rhode Island cannot attract much-needed entrepreneurial investment if it continues to burden its residents with higher and higher taxes. That's it for the news. But first, are you kidding me?
Your legislature and mine now wants to force managed care facilities to retain employees longer, or else. Are you kidding me? Senate Bill 322 would require these long-term health care businesses to work under the direction of the Executive Office of Health and Human Services of Rhode Island to develop incentives to increase retention of direct caregivers. Senators Goldman, Miller, Satchel, and Wiseguy figure these skilled nursing facilities have all the administrative capacity in the world to go to EOHHS meetings, simply comply with the inevitable program mandates that are received there, and then magically make them all come out the way the senators envisioned it. Senator Wiseguy joins us to explain. Senator, doesn't meeting that kind of detailed government mandate cost money?
Forget about it.
And it's money these companies don't have in an environment of federal controlled prices, sir.
Forget about it.
So if the state forces their costs up, that money will have to come out of some other part of their operation, right?
Forget about it.
Good thinking, senators. You degrade working conditions and promote employee departure. Are you kidding me?
Welcome to Common Sense. This is a program where we try to make sense out of the policies that affect your life and come up with common sense solutions. Today we have Dean Edward Mazze from the University of Rhode Island. He is a distinguished university professor of business administration, and he was the former dean of the College of Business Administration. So he brings a lot of expertise with him. He knows business forward and backward and in and out, and he knows how to look at a deal and see whether it makes sense. So we're going to talk to him a little bit today about the Pawsox deal, which has been in the news quite a bit lately. You know that the team was recently bought, and the new owners want to move it to Providence, to the 195 land. In doing that, they want a lot of subsidies from the taxpayers. And I think it's important that we look at this and see whether it actually makes sense for the state's taxpayers, for our economic environment, whether it makes sense from a business point of view. So welcome, Dr. Mazze.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. This is a very controversial topic.
It's a very controversial topic.
So what I'm going to say has nothing to do whether I like or dislike baseball. And of course, like most Rhode Islanders, I'd like to see the Pawsox stay in Rhode Island, but not in the way they would like to be here, using a lot of taxpayer money to build a stadium where many may not be coming to.
Yeah, I think everybody would like to see the Pawsox stay. They already have a stadium in Pawtucket, and my understanding is they actually have very good attendance in Pawtucket compared to other AAA baseball teams around the country. What do you think about moving it 7 miles south and putting it there on the 195 land? Do you think that's the right place to put it?
Well, I think you have to look at this situation from several different perspectives. First of all, you have to look at it from the perspective of the fan, the customer.
The customer.
Yeah, the person who's going to be going
it's always
to
been
the ballpark.
It's always been a family venue up there, very inexpensive.
And very inexpensive. You don't pay for parking. The concession prices are reasonable as compared to going to other types of facilities. And it's interesting in all of the discussions that are going on about the move of the stadium to another location, you see very little in terms of marketing research as to what the season ticket holders would like to do, how much they spend, would they be willing to drive to another stadium?
Sure.
And so that whole part of the discussion has really been put on the back burner.
It's been mentioned, but only in passing.
Right.
The fact that the ticket prices would probably have to go up, the parking becomes an issue for families because it's expensive to park down in Providence. But you're right. So I haven't heard that they have done a marketing.
Well, if they've done it, they haven't shared it. And I would not want to come to a quick impression as to, even if the study showed that people would travel, you would have to set up a series of circumstances. For example, if an afternoon game ended at 5 o'clock and you ended up in a traffic jam for 2 or 3 hours to go home, you're not going to be a happy individual. So
No.
you may not come back if you can't get a parking place. So I mean, there's a lot of different scenarios. So that's one side of the
Okay,
equation.
look at the fan,
Yeah,
see
look
whether
at
they
the
would
family.
actually
Would they come?
welcome it.
And,
Sure.
and how many of them would come? Will they come to day games or evening games? The second issue is really to look at the past history. We hear a lot of people talk about the attendance. Well, it'll be interesting to know how many people are paying to go as compared to how many complimentary tickets are being given out.
Mr. Mondor was very, very generous
Right, so-
with the scouts and different
Yeah.
little league teams and things. Yeah, he wanted it to be a family venue.
Well, and when you look at the current facility, you've got to also ask other questions. So, for example, how many days a year is the facility actually being used? The days that it's not being used by the Pawsox team, who is it being used by, and are they paying?
Well, my understanding, let me just interject, is from the study from what the new owners have said, the new facility would be open only 100 days a year, and that would include baseball games and a few concerts and things like that. So
that for 200,
less than a third
all
of
right,
the year.
So for over 200 days, the place is going to be empty.
Empty.
And if the argument is, it would be a great sight for people to see an empty stadium 200 days a year, why don't we just hire somebody to paint a big mural, so as you drive along 95 or
You can
wherever,
see it.
you can see a picture of a stadium. I mean, it's bizarre. What's happening in this situation,
That's a
which
cute
is not,
visual,
which
yeah.
is not unusual, is you have a group of investors who have hired individuals who have done research and have come up with information that's very supportive of their position. There's nothing wrong with that. But my concern,
let me just...
Well, my concern, of course, is, as you said, there's nothing wrong if they're not asking for something from others.
If it's all private money,
Right.
that's right. Though I have some problems with the place that they chose. That's actually very valuable land.
Oh, definitely.
It's supposed to be full-time, year-round, diverse jobs.
Well, it's
Companies that actually hire executives and all the way down, entry level.
that goes to the other point. So you have the fan, which is out there somewhere. Then you have the issue of what the existing facility is in terms of use, not use, who's using. Now, the third thing that you're talking about, before we even get to the economic development part, is look at the Pawsox where they are right now. Over the last 2 or 3 years, how much have they paid in state sales tax? How much have they done in payroll tax? How much have they done in property tax? Now, all of this information should be able to be gotten either from the state or from the city
Sure.
of Pawtucket. You look at the average salaries. You look at the
They're not
baseball
very
players.
good for the baseball players.
And you look at
They're
them.
okay, but yeah.
Well, no, on minor league players, probably you're talking about $20,000 to $30,000 a year. Many of them don't live in the state. I don't know if they're getting any type of benefits. In other words, health benefits or anything. Well, that's what. So you have to look at the current operation now. As a business person, I have to assume that somewhere along the way, the buyer of the team, the investment group, have looked at some of those issues.
Oh,
the,
yes.
the problem is that they haven't shared the information. In other words, everybody's talking about...
How much did you buy it for? What
Well,
are
no,
you
how
gonna
much
pay?
they buy it for is their business.
Okay.
My concern is how much has the Pawsox organization paid in taxes
Okay.
under the old management? Because that's going to be some type of indication under the new management. In other
Okay,
words,
sure.
the sales tax. If 6,000 people are going to a game, which I question, and they're all buying a hot dog, how much of that hot dog tax money has been returned to somebody? And I don't know, because nobody's talking about what they're doing. Now, if you go the next step, and you talk about economic development, job growth, Now you go into the issue of where they want to move.
Okay, and I'm going to stop you right there because we're going to take a little bit of a break, and we're going to have a "Are you kidding me?" segment, and then we're going to come back and talk about economic development because that's what Rhode Island needs right now, desperately. Welcome to Common Sense. This is a program where we try to make sense out of the policies that affect your life.
Common Sense is on each week on Verizon Channel 34 or Cox Channel 15, Saturdays at 4 p.m., Sundays at 10 a.m. You can also find us online at www.commonsenseri.org. Join our host, Representative Patricia Morgan, each week as she brings you a variety of experts from the financial or small business community, government policy experts, town councilors, and members of our state General Assembly to discuss the issues that affect your life. We review the news of the week from our own perspective with Elizabeth Smith and Luis Vargas. We hear from Jeff Richard, who always brings us some interesting insight, and where we always ask the question, are you kidding me? So remember to join us on Verizon Channel 34 or Cox Channel 15, Saturdays at 4 p.m. and Sundays at 10 a.m., or online at www.commonsenseri.org, on Facebook and our YouTube channel, Common Sense, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter at CommonSenseRI. This week on Common Sense.
Your Rhode Island Senate and mine now wants to bloat the coming budget with a stealth pay raise for all non-classified state workers. And they want to do it under cover of education reform. Are you kidding me? Senate Bill 371 amends RI General Law 16-59 entitled Board of Governors for Higher Education. The bill adds sections in the law's language which covers longevity pay for staffers of the Board of Governors. The added language doles out that same longevity largesse to all Rhode Island state workers, courtesy of Senators Chacon, Lombardi, Walaska, and Felag. State workers with 10 years service get a 5% of base pay increase, and for those who have served 20 years, it's a 10% bump. I wonder if any arithmetic has been done to figure out how much that increases our already huge operating deficit. I wonder why there's nothing in the bill about increased productivity, now that we are proposing to increase the burdened cost of more than half our 13,000 plus employees. I wonder why the bill's sponsors felt that they had to hide this little goodie in an RIGL chapter on education. As usual, I really wonder who's kidding who around here. Are you kidding me?
Join us on Verizon Channel 34 or Cox Channel 15. Saturdays at 4 p.m. and Sunday at 10 a.m. Find us on Facebook at Common Sense and on Twitter at CommonSenseRI.
Welcome back. We're talking with Dean Mazze from URI about the Pawsox deal, the moving of the stadium. And I just wanted to talk a little bit more before we go down to the 195 land. You said that we should actually find out how much sales tax, property tax, income tax the Pawsox have generated. So we have a right to ask the owners what their payroll is and what they made in the past on concessions and those things?
Well, it's not what they've made because you could determine that by if they tell you what the sales tax is. But it's just to get a picture as to really what size organization, because you're talking about at the end of the day, an investment of well over $100 million.
Well over.
Yeah, because there's other things that will come along. So, and also in terms of payroll, you really want to look at a couple of different payrolls. And what you want is the average salary. In other words, the average salary of a ball player is probably going to be $25,000.
Yeah.
Now, if they have 10 people in management, the average salary there, I would suspect, is going to be less than $100,000.
Okay.
So when you
there's hot dog
and the seasonal workers.
Yeah, the seasonal.
So when you start getting all of those numbers, that immediately it becomes a red light as to economic development and the creation of jobs.
Right.
In other words,
because they make claims that it's going to generate,
right.
But we could get the hard numbers from what it generated.
Right, and it's not going to generate more. And in fact, what I think you're going to discover, because I've studied sports teams, is that you're going to find that there's a small number of people making a reasonable amount of money and a very large number of people barely making a reasonable amount of money. So, I can almost guess the results based on my experience looking at minor league teams and professional teams. Early in my career, I was in banking, and I was CEO of a bank in Philadelphia, and among our major clients were the Phillies, the Eagles, and the 76ers.
Okay. Cool.
So I know a little bit about salaries.
All right.
Yeah, it was a long time ago, but even a long time ago, their salaries are probably 100 times greater than the salaries we're talking about now at the Pawsox.
Well, it's a triple. Yeah, it's
Yes,
a triple A team. So
and also, you know, when anybody talks about economic development and the creation of jobs, and there's taxpayer money involved, I think we have a right to say how many jobs are going to be created, and with what salary ranges, and with what type of requirements. Because if the answer is not acceptable, we're just investing money into something that
somebody else's dream.
That's somebody else's dream. And I think, again, those questions are okay. Now, the questions that, we have to be careful about, private enterprise has to be private enterprise.
Exactly.
You can't.
And yet they're asking for a lot of state dollars. And there's the difference. If it's a private industry and it's all their own money, I have no problem with them being private. But when they start going out and saying, we want $120 million plus tax relief, plus this, plus that, plus the other, they're now starting to take public money.
Right.
So it kind of blurs the line between private and public.
The point, the representative that I was going to make was that anything that relates to attendance, taxes, utilization of a facility is open game on the building of any stadium anywhere in the United States. It would be as though Providence was going after the Olympics in 2018 or 2022. They have a right to know how many people go to the facility, how many people, what do they spend, how far do they come?
Right.
Now, this is very basic information. We're not asking, are they making money, are they losing money? If they're losing money, that the investors group has to figure out why they went into the deal. And if they're making money, that's great. I mean, nobody wants to take away money from them.
No, everybody should make a profit.
But this thing has become complicated for three reasons. Number one, it came on with the speed of lightning.
Yeah.
In other words, we're in a situation now that we're going to confuse everybody by giving out facts that we're going to manage.
Yes.
So you have,
and you have to make the decision within 60 days.
So you have something that just hit the deck. We have
and there's no time to vet it thoroughly.
We have a new mayor in Providence. We have a new governor. We have new legislators.
Yep.
And all at once you have to do it. So that was the first thing that happened.
Right.
And of course, baseball, the flag, and apple pie is what America's all about.
We all like baseball.
Who in their right mind is going to get up and say, let's get rid of baseball in the state? It's not going to happen. So that was the first thing that hit. The second thing that hit is that they want to go to a geographic area, a piece of land that has almost become sacred. First, it's the knowledge district.
Yeah.
Then first was the jewelry
valuable.
district. Now it's the
valuable land.
It's very valuable land.
Valuable land for what it can bring.
But
what its promise is.
Yeah, but the big problem, Representative, is up to this point that has brought nothing.
Well, but
and that was an opportunity for this investment group.
But you don't just shove anything in there.
I agree. I'm not in favor of putting it. So you have the land. You have
just because it's empty doesn't mean that you throw it away.
Would I be as vocal if all at once they wanted to build an adult entertainment center down there? I would be just as vocal. That land isn't designed for it. So then the third
has a
thing,
better
use
and promise.
And then the third thing is that they want concessions. So you put those three things together, and as an old friend of mine said, and he wasn't in the spice business, something doesn't smell right.
Okay.
And usually, if it doesn't,
too much oregano.
That's right. If it doesn't smell right, there's probably a good chance that it isn't right. And what concerns me is the fact that there is a lot of information that must be collected, not put under the rug, whether it's by the House, a committee of the House, the Budget Committee, by the mayor, by the governor. But
Well, I do think it's unreasonable for them to come out and say, we want $120 million plus this, this, and this, and we want it within 60 days.
Well, but you see,
that's just wrong. It doesn't give us time to actually study it thoroughly.
But you see, Representative, this is how we get into trouble in the state. We look at the tip of the iceberg.
And don't see what's underneath.
And we say that, and you're correct, we don't have the time, we need to do it. But the important thing is what's underneath the tip of the iceberg, is to say, hold it. We have basic questions that we need the answers to. They're not 30,000 feet questions, they're 7 feet questions, 6 feet questions.
They're on the foundation.
Yes, that's right. Give us the answers to these questions, and then we may have more questions.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm not, and I think, Representative, what happens, and I've watched this on so many situations, is the fact that we don't go down to the basics. It's scary. I've had whether it's good fortune or bad fortune. I mean, I've addressed the legislature. I don't know if you were a representative then when I was there, when Speaker Murphy invited me.
Oh, no, I wasn't there.
All right, and I'm going to tell you that at the end of the day, the type of information that you would need if you were going out to buy an automobile that you would insist on, we do not insist on when we're looking at a $100 million deal at the state level, the city level.
Okay, and I'm going to hold you there, and we're going to talk about some of the things that we must insist upon, and we're going to come right back in just a minute.
What do I stand for? What do I stand for? Most nights I don't know anymore.
This week on Common Sense.
Is our legislature trying to tell insurance companies how to do business again? Are you kidding me? It's true. With the introduction of Senate Bill 321, Senators Golden and Miller mean to force their superior market instincts on the likes of Rhode Island, Blue Cross of Rhode Island. The bill requires all health insurers to offer coverage for telemedicine. In fact, the bill goes on to define what telemedicine is in great detail. The bill apparently ignores the fact that Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island already offers such coverage, not because of government mandate, because of market forces. So here we go again. Our state government is bound and determined to make something happen by mandate that it will be much better implemented by the free market. In fact, it's already being implemented, and without the excess overhead of required reporting and additional record keeping, to prove compliance. Get out of the way, guys. We're working here. Are you kidding me?
Join us on Verizon Channel 34 or Cox Channel 15. Saturdays at 4 p.m. and Sunday at 10 a.m. Find us on Facebook at Common Sense and on Twitter at CommonSenseRI.
Okay, welcome back. We're here with Dean Ed Mazze from URI, and he has a wealth of knowledge that we can really learn from as it relates to the Pawsox deal. One of the things that I've heard them say that this new stadium would be catalytic. I'm starting to hate the word, be honest with you, because to me it's just another word for boondoggle. But catalytic means that it will spark development all around that area. And yet when you go up to the current stadium, the McCoy Stadium, that hasn't been true. Do you think it will be different down in Providence?
No, I don't. In fact, in Pawtucket, and they've attempted over and over again to make economic development count. I mean, they've done a lot of things with the mills.
Yes.
They've brought a number of different types of cultural events. I mean, you've got to give Pawtucket a lot of credit for trying to pick themselves up by the bootstrap. The facility, the stadium in Pawtucket hasn't done anything. I mean, if you look around it, you'll see there's been very little in the way of economic growth. And you would see the same in Providence, only because, again, you're making assumptions that, 5 years ago and 10 years ago may have worked where people could stop work and go to a ball game.
Right.
In fact, you know, in the world of baseball, and I grew up in New York with the Yankees, Dodgers, and Giants. You know, in the world of baseball today, most people have a hard time sitting still for 30 minutes. If you sat still for 3 hours waiting for those 9 innings to go, I mean, it's almost like a slow death for individuals. And so, you know, to make the assumption that people after a hard day of work are going to spend another couple of hours at the AAA minor league game, particularly when they could get in the car and in an hour be in Boston and watch the Red Sox. I mean, I think that's a silly assumption. Now, during the day,
but also you mentioned, and we're all aware of it, so many buildings in downtown Providence are empty.
Well,
they're not coming out of the Fleet building anymore. A lot of those other buildings have been turned into dormitories that are empty during the summer.
And also, not only are the buildings empty, but the organizations that are still in Providence have been downsized. So if you used to have 8 people in the marketing department of XYZ company, now you have 3 people.
Yeah.
So now you're going to say 2 of them are going to go over to the ball game. So you have all of those circumstances. But even more importantly, Representative, that piece of land is critical for various types of development. A stadium isn't one of those types of development.
No.
Now, you know, my institution is planning to have a nursing school.
Yes.
Brown University is doing things. Johnson and Wales is doing things. Roger Williams has a presence in Providence. New England Tech, the community college, the hospitals. Now, do any of them have anything common with an athletic team, a AAA team?
Well, according to Mr.
No.
Skeffington, they're going to want to sit there and look up the bay and then down through the city, and that's going to be the draw.
Well, to me, the real issue is if they want to do that, let's hire a couple of RISD artists, and we could change the murals every season, every week.
That's a good
Give
idea.
artists an opportunity to become recognized. I mean, I think that there is just so many terms. You use the term catalyst. I mean, you know, we use the term economic development. We use the term jobs. And they're all politically correct terms. But, you know, you fast forward over the next couple of years, and things are not getting that much better. I mean, you know, we don't see in Rhode Island the type of economic development that the numbers are now beginning to produce. In other words, we've seen our unemployment rate go down, but nobody's talking about the underemployment rate going up.
Going up, or the fact that people are leaving.
Yeah, so
right, people are leaving. Maybe that's why our unemployment is going down, because they've just given up finding a job in Rhode Island and they've gone elsewhere.
And also, as you and I talked earlier, you have a demographics issue.
Yes.
You know, when we said, let's look at who
our
the
young
fan
people
is.
are leaving.
Well, let's look at who the fan is. So we're going to build a stadium. And if the fan happens to be between 45 and 65, that's one type of fan. But if the fan happens to be between 60 and 80, they're not going to pay for parking. They're not going to go into rush hour traffic.
They don't want to.
But more importantly, they're not going to go to the Capitol Grill because their Social Security benefits and whatever pension isn't going to allow them to go out to dinner.
But I imagine the owners will go to Capitol Grill.
Well, look, I you know, as a former dean of a business school and as a professor of business,
Yes.
I want every one of my graduates, I want every URI alum
To go to
who
Capitol
has
Grill.
my name on
That's
their
right.
diploma to go to Capitol Grill at least 4 times a year to celebrate a pay increase or a promotion.
I think that's a good
All right,
goal.
that's my objective.
That's a great goal.
But I'll also tell you, I don't suspect of the 4 those that will be going, they'll be walking to the new stadium if it ever exists in Providence.
That's right. And I mean, you've kind of alluded to it. I really think that land is valuable. It has promise, and the promise isn't to have it with an empty stadium 3/4 of the year. You know, to put concerts in there, we have the Dunkin' Donuts Center, which is empty a great deal of the year. So do we have then competition with assets that we already have that the taxpayers are already funding?
Well, you have PPAC, you have
Right.
you have the other facility, which I always forget the name of it,
Veterans Memorial.
Veterans Memorial Hall. You have Trinity.
I mean, at some point,
And
there's a saturation point.
Well, I could tell you that we go often to various events. It's very rare that the facility is fully occupied.
Yes.
So, and the other argument that they're using, which is getting some attention, because it's again it sounds good to people, is that the 11 or 12 colleges and universities in Rhode Island will use that facility for a baseball team or football, and that is malarkey, because
They're
all these
already playing somewhere.
well, and they want you to be back on their campus. You don't have somebody else's campus.
They're not going to rent. They're not going to rent
Yeah,
what
but-
they already own on their own
Yeah,
campus.
but more important, alumni want to go home.
Right.
They don't want to do that. So Representative, this is one of those situations where the number of questions to ask may very well be like this new
Long
television
list.
program, 500 questions.
Yeah.
And you'll have a ringside seat to see how few questions will be answered. And that's the sad.
Well, and I think that's what the new
sad
owners
part.
would like.
Well,
Let's shortstop the debate here. It's not fully vetted at this point. You give a glitzy marketing plan, you give a glitzy economic impact study that you've paid for, so you get what you're paying for. It's not been fully vetted, and I don't think we should be making a quick decision.
Well, I would agree, and I also think, minimally, and I know you'll do it, is minimally to say I would like to see any marketing research study that has been done in the last 3 years regarding Pawsox in Pawtucket, and the fans. Now, if they tell you there have been no studies, those are not the type of business people I would want to invest in.
No.
If they tell you there are studies, but they're proprietary, the response would be,
You want our money, we want the studies.
That's exactly it.
I'm just gonna stop you again for a few minutes because we have another Are You Kidding Me segment, and we'll be right back.
Hello, Rhode Island. My name is Arthur C. Shopper. I am a local and national writer and radio host. Also a key contributor to 990WBOB.com based in Cranston, Rhode Island. And I'm reaching out to you through Common Sense Rhode Island to spread the conservative message, not just from the Ocean State, but across the country, even to the Golden State where I live. Tune in to the State of the Union. That's my radio show, State of the Union, from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time every Thursday. I talk about the local, the national, and the international news, plus my take on it. I'll be talking about Rhode Island, as well as California, and even what's going on in the world, too. So tune in every Thursday from 12 to 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can find my site at 990WBOB.com, at twilighttalkradio.com, and you call in at 424-243-9626. Make sure that you press 1. That's how you get in the queue.
Welcome back. We're going to continue our conversation with Dr. Mazze. We have been talking about the Pawsox deal. And now I want to turn to the costs, what the new owners are expecting from taxpayers, and it's a long list. And whether that makes sense, what we should be looking at in terms of all those costs. First, we know that they want a $120 million lease, basically. Now, I've been studying the Convention Center Authority, and I can tell you that before that building was even begun, before the first shovel went in the ground, the state had signed a lease with the Convention Center Authority. There had never been a vote of the people in this case. And they said, whatever the debt was going to be, whatever the operating costs, whatever the maintenance costs, the state would be on the hook for it. And we have been on the hook for it. Originally, when the economic impact studies were done, they said that the taxpayers would not pay a dime towards the Convention Center Authority. So far, we've paid about $450 million. It'll be about $750 million before the building is paid off, if it's ever paid off, because they're always looking for remodeling and that kind of stuff. So I am very suspect of economic impact studies because they were done, and they projected profit, enough profit to pay all of the bonding requirements, their operating costs, everything. But they want $120 million. They want other stuff too. There is a big gas main that goes underneath that property, cost $22 million to move. That's what I've been told. There is then the water issue, the sewer issue. They say $5 million to move that. Even the authority said $7 million. They want no taxes for the city of Providence. So Providence says if we make this tax deal, we want the taxes to come from the state taxpayers. Can we add more to that?
Oh, and then of course there's going to be continuing costs for police, fire, maintenance. I mean, this is one of those deals again, which the more you think about it,
remodeling down the road.
Yeah, well, the more you think about it, you know two things. Number one, it's never going to be paid off or paid back. So
not over 30 years because there's remodeling every 10 years or so.
And secondly, we realize that if you look at any economic forecast for the state that's even stretched out farther and farther into the future, we're not going to have that type of population base and that type of population growth to afford it. And the city of Providence really can't afford to give up the tax money. I mean, because if they give up the tax money and they keep increasing what the cost for people who live in Providence are with automobiles, they're going to eventually lose that population base. So
and I've heard that we're the second highest corporate tax rate in the country. Providence is.
Well,
it's very high.
Providence tax rate is among the highest, but
and isn't that a disincentive then for companies to come?
Well, I don't think I think if I tend to simplify these things. If you divide it in what they want from the state, and as your role, what you need to do in whatever report has been commissioned is have them set out different scenarios, like a 1% population growth, a 5%,
okay,
a 15%, and you'll notice a lot of coughing and choking. Because, once you start asking the consultant to do that, the consultant realizes that there's already a level of suspicion.
Well, I'll tell you, in every economic study, impact study, there's so many disclaimers.
Yeah, that you want that.
It's like, I'm giving you what you've paid for, but trust me, I'm not being held responsible for it.
But even more importantly, as I said, one is you want the different scenarios, because I think that's important. And then the second thing is, in the world of business, when you go to a bank and you want money, sometimes they ask for personal guarantees. One of the guarantees is that the team cannot leave during the period that the taxpayers are going to be paying. Now, of course, that raises a very interesting situation, because if the team says we're going to go bankrupt because we can't leave, the state's stuck. If the team says we're going to leave and
somebody else bought it,
sue us, you're going to get stuck. And if somebody buys it under those conditions, they must have been brought into Rhode Island late at night and said, boy, do we have a deal, we're going to throw that and the Pell Bridge in, and you're going to have a stadium and a bridge.
Yeah.
Because who is going to buy a minor league team with a condition that you can't leave in 10 years,
even if you're
years,
not making money,
30 years? So, again, it goes back to what I said in an earlier segment, Representative. It doesn't smell right. And if it doesn't smell right, it's
probably a bad deal.
One of the things, my first deanship was Seton Hall University, and that's a diocesan school, archdiocese. The bishop once told me something which I thought was one of the most profound comments. And I listened very carefully. He was a bishop. Not often does a bishop speak to a dean.
Okay.
Bishop said, Dean, if it looks like garbage and it smells like garbage, there's a very high probability
it's garbage.
It's garbage.
One of the things that strikes me is the taxpayers, through this leasing agreement, is going to pay for the stadium, but they'll never own it.
Well, the whole...
I mean, it's not like you can move it, I get it, but they're not going to make... even if it's paid off and there starts to be a profit, a bigger profit, the taxpayers don't get the benefit of it.
But it's...
we don't own the team, we don't own the stadium, we don't own the profit, if there's any.
But Representative, it reminds me of the last recession in the United States. When people took a hard look at the last recession, they came to, and I know you're in the finance area, they came to a conclusion that all of this resulted because of all of these bizarre types of financial instruments and arrangements. People thought subprime mortgage meant that you got a good deal on the mortgage, that you were paying lower interest. They didn't know that it meant that the mortgage smelled.
Yeah.
Okay? Well, we could probably spend 3 or 4 programs of your programs talking about all of this type of financing. At the end of the day, your constituents and the average Rhode Island taxpayer has to come across with only one conclusion. If I don't understand the deal, there's something wrong with the deal. Now, this morning I read that it would be $4 million a year for 30 years, and $2 million would come back through various types of taxes. By tomorrow, it's going to probably be $0 million a year for everything. Right off the bat, you got to go back to the basics. I mean,
Right.
this is.
They don't need, really, if they could do it with that, they don't need our guarantees. It's like a subprime mortgage. This lease that we're giving to them is assuring their private investors, don't worry, the taxpayers will be the backstop here. The taxpayers shouldn't have to be a backstop.
Well, it's
Not if it's not a great deal
No.
for the taxpayers.
Well, it's again, we're all faced with the dilemma. Nobody wants to see the baseball team leave.
Nope.
So that's on one hand. And on the other hand is we have got to do our due diligence. We've got to be transparent. We got to understand that any threat becomes not only a negative, but to walk away and say, good, you want to leave? Leave.
Yep.
And then move on. Now, if we do that, we may come to the conclusion that this deal is the greatest thing in the world, or we may come to the conclusion that this is not a good deal, or we may even come to a conclusion that this facility should stay in Pawsox.
Yep.
Stay in Pawtucket.
In McCoy Stadium.
Or it may move to another location. But I think right now we're running around, and I think the danger.
I am forever learning new things. When you dig into some of those new things, it is amazing how the information never seems to end. And so it was when I passed a sign in my town of Portsmouth that read, Portsmouth Housing Authority and Coastal Housing Corporation. Now, I couldn't see any houses from the street, so I went home and looked these folks up. Sure enough, Portsmouth does have a public housing authority. And that authority actually has 5 voting members, all of them indeed appointed by our own town council. Now, I wondered how many other housing agencies there were in our small state of Rhode Island. So I looked that up also. Bunches. Actually, there are 26 housing authorities scattered about the state. And so, of course, some of them are responsible for multiple towns, like Portsmouth or Middletown, for instance. The Portsmouth Group owns and operates one project with 40 affordable rental units. It also manages 85 Section 8 housing vouchers. This particular unit is considered a small one in this state, but it does manage to have more Section 8 housing vouchers than any average housing authority has. I don't know why that is yet. I had no idea what a voucher was in this instance, so I looked that up. Seems if you make little or no money, you can qualify for lots of government largesse, including housing assistance. Now, you have to sign up and be screened, and once the system has determined that you qualify, you're in. Generally, if you make a little money, you give that to your landlord to cover 30% of the cost of the monthly rental. Now, the rest of this fair market rental value is paid by, you guessed it, the taxpayer. HUD sets the rates for each unit in its system. Now, whether it's elder housing, where you have to be 62, of course we have Anthony House in Portsmouth, or disabled tenants, or folks who simply need an inexpensive place to stay. So we have all these types of units in Portsmouth and scattered about the state. Now, as well, we have private homes that the owners have agreed to accept Section 8 vouchers to rent out their homes in space. Let's regress. What's behind the Portsmouth Housing Authority? Now, that would be the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, a cabinet department in the executive branch of our government. Now, it got started in its present form in 1965 as part of President Lyndon Johnson's Great Society program. Originally, it was not what it has grown up to be, but in the manner of most government programs, it certainly is what it is. The 1934 National Housing Act created the Federal Housing Administration, FHA. The object was to provide mortgage insurance on loans made by FHA-approved lenders, the banks. Now listen to the current, today's mission statement for HUD. HUD's mission is to create strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and quality, affordable homes for all. Wow. I wonder how the free market is managing with HUD doing all of the work. Well, how about its budget? That will tell us something about what HUD is. And that would be $46 million a year. And it takes about 8,000 government employees to spend that much money. Now, you surely have read, or you've been reading at least, listening to the issue about Roadmap Rhode Island. Now, that's the one where HUD gave the Rhode Island Division of Planning a bunch of grant money to study how best to improve our livability. Great word, livability. Apparently, only Mr. Kevin Flynn of that department got to sign off on the state guide plan. And that was back in 2011. Now we're 4 years down the pike. I guess HUD expects the state to follow what that plan ended up with, or we get sued, which HUD has done. Seems the government would like to be able to put any kind of housing anywhere it wants, regardless of local laws and regulations. Now, if you've been watching this program, you know we just did a nice segment on that. I commend that to you. Now, this, of course, to me doesn't sound fair to run a business like that. Public housing is an entire PhD's worth of learning. But I thought it might be fun to go to the various websites to follow the path to housing. I started with the Section 8 program. That's the one where you sign up and prove you make so little that you qualify for a housing voucher. Now, I went to section8application.com. Now, filled in my name, pressed the continue button. It asked me to get my credit score. And they would like to do that for me. Next thing I know, the screen is asking me to start a background check. Well, I passed, but learned that I could actually get the same information that I just got on myself on anybody I know, just by typing in their name. Now, at the end of this particular check, they asked me to pay $22.86 for 1 month of unlimited reports. Tap the next screen. It wants to give me $5,000 from Publishers Clearinghouse if I would fill out a questionnaire. Then the screen wants to know if I would like $250 worth of grocery cards or $1,000 of a gas card. You know, this is the kicker. The $500 one. Here's even the check. This is the $5,000. Then Firefox came up and said, now it wouldn't let me. Firefox would not let me install the software from marketflow.com, which happened to come up on the screen. Boy, if I were really needing to do all of this, I would need someone to walk me through the process. You know, better I show up in person at one of the housing authorities and listen carefully. Now, have a marvelous day and God bless.
Hello, welcome to Common Sense. This is a program where we try to make sense out of the policies that affect your life.
Common Sense is on each week on Verizon Channel 34 or Cox Channel 15. Saturdays at 4 p.m., Sundays at 10 a.m. You can also find us online at www.commonsenseri.org. Join our host, Representative Patricia Morgan, each week as she brings you a variety of experts from the financial or small business community, government policy experts, town councilors, and members of our state General Assembly to discuss the issues that affect your life. We review the news of the week from our own perspective with Elizabeth Smith and Luis Vargas. We hear from Jeff Richard, who always brings us some interesting insight, and where we always ask the question, are you kidding me? So remember to join us on Verizon Channel 34, or Cox Channel 15, Saturdays at 4 p.m. and Sundays at 10 a.m., or online at www.commonsenseri.org, on Facebook and our YouTube channel, Common Sense, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter at CommonSenseRI.